How do you determine what price to offer when buying a property? How do you determine what a home is actually worth? Well, in today's video, we're going to be walking you through that process as a buyer, what you need to think about when putting an offer in on a home. Now, something to remember early on in the video is that prices are relative. Right? While me and you may think a home is overpriced, if somebody is willing to pay that price, then in many ways, that's what the home is worth. But what we're going to try to do is take a step back from that and think of it from an agent perspective. When I'm helping home buyers walk through the offer process in determining how much they should offer for a home, how am I coming up with that number? Well, that's exactly what we're going to dive into right after you hit that thumbs up if you find any value in my videos at all. And also do me a favor and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on everything Orange County and real estate related. One of the very first things you want to do as a buyer when making an offer on a property and trying to figure out the price is first take a step back and understand what type of market you're in. Now, what does that mean? Well, there's two types of markets. There's a buyer's market, which favors buyers, and then there's a seller's market, which typically favors sellers. So how do you differentiate between the two? Well, going back and looking traditionally speaking at a buyer's market versus a seller's market, a buyer's market is when there's at least 6 months of inventory on the market. That means there's 6 months supply of homes in your given area to purchase. Well, that means it's a buyer's market. Whereas if there's less than 6 months of supply on the market, then that traditionally means it's a seller's market. Now, I think that definition has changed over time, and that's largely due to how inventory is currently being impacted. So we've been dealing with inventory issues for the better part of 3 years with just a lack of supply out there in many markets. There's been more buyer demand than there has been supply. And even as interest rates rose to 23-year highs, touching just over 8%, we didn't see this flood of inventory come to the market. Now, part of that was seasonality, right? It was a slower time of the year in general. But even with that said, inventory didn't go crazy and start coming to the market. And that's because many sellers out there have locked in super low interest rates, which is going to keep them in their properties for an extended period of time, which in theory is going to keep that property from coming to the market unless we see interest rates come down in a meaningful way. So when I think of buyer's markets and seller's markets at the moment, yes, I'm still looking at supply to give me an indicator of what type of market we're in, but I'm not really thinking, is it 6 months or 5 months or whatever? I'm looking at the overall speed of the market. Is there a little bit of supply and things are moving really, really fast? Or is there a little bit more supply on the market? Maybe not 6 months, maybe there's 4, 5 months on the market and things have slowed down. Homes are sitting on the market longer. Days on the market are going up. That might be an indication that the market is starting to shift from, say, a seller's market to a buyer's market. But with that, at the time I'm filming this video, we're in a seller's market in many markets out there because there's a lack of supply on the market and buyer demand is more or less moving in lockstep with supply. So while we don't have this overwhelming buyer demand out there in the market, we have enough buyer demand on the market to keep home prices stabilized and moving up in many markets out there, especially when you start considering homes under the median price point. Here in Orange County where I'm located, if a home comes on the market and it's priced according to fair market value, which we're going to talk about here in just a moment, it's still getting multiple offers on that property, which is a clear indicator that you're still in a seller's market. Or on top of that, when you see homes selling in a weekend or in a week or a couple of weeks, that's a clear indication that you're also in a seller's market. But as things start to change, more inventory starts to come to the market, days on the market start to go up, that means that you're moving more towards a buyer's market. And the reason I want you to think about this first is because it should have an impact on how you make your offer. If you're in a seller's market, you're likely going to have to be more aggressive with your offer. You're not likely going to be able to lowball a property, especially when it's priced correctly, versus being in a buyer's market. When a home's been on the market for 6 months, 8 months, even a year, you've seen that they've reduced the price multiple times. Well, that might be an opportunity to get a little bit more aggressive with your offers. So first, instead of worrying about the price, first take a step back and think about that buyer's market versus seller's market. And then the next thing you want to do is figure out what you believe the fair market value of that home to be. Now, your agent, your real estate professional that's helping you through this process should help you by providing comparable properties to you to help you get an idea of what a property's worth. Now, what am I talking about when I say comparable properties? Well, what you're trying to do is find as close to a match of the home that you're looking at that is sold recently in order to get an idea of what that home is worth. So what you're trying to do is find homes that have similar bedroom counts, bathroom counts, square footage, lot size, similar location. And this is exactly what an appraiser would do when trying to determine the value of a property. They're going to try to go out there and find as close to a match of that home as possible. And it's even better if you can find a model match to that home in a similar location, because that gives you a real clear indication of what that home is likely to sell for. Now, in some areas of the country, I realize that's difficult. They don't make tract homes. Every home is custom built and you have large lots and all the lots vary, and maybe the nearest comparable home is a couple of miles away. In those markets, it's going to be much harder to figure out the value of a home, and you're going to have to rely on your agent even more because they're going to have to do more work. But even as your agent guides you through determining what a home is worth, you can do a lot of this research on your own because there's so much information out there on the internet right now between Zillow and Redfin and all of these different sites. You can see what recent homes have sold for. But in looking at what these homes have sold for, not only are you looking at the things that we talked about, bedroom, bathroom, square footage, location, lot size, all of that stuff, you also have to factor in the condition of that property. Is it completely remodeled to today's taste, or is it originals? Is it from 1960 and they still have the shag green carpet in there and the original roof from that time, and you're comparing it to something that is completely remodeled? Well, if that's the case, you have to factor in those cost of improvements when you factor in what that home is worth. On top of that, you're also going to look at things like pools. Does it have a pool? Does it have solar? Does it have RV parking? These are additional things that may not seem like a big thing, but they do add value to a property, on top of looking at what's happening in the market at this time. During 2021, we knew that the market was appreciating about 3 to 4% per month in some locations out there. So if you sold a home in, say, February, we knew if you were looking at a home that came on the market in March, that you had to factor in that time from when that property originally went under contract, which was probably in January. It closed in February. So not only do you have that appreciation from January to February, you have that appreciation from February to March, and we had to factor that into the offer price. So people were baffled by how a home could sell for so much more than the home 2 months ago. Well, that's how fast the market was appreciating. And now that doesn't mean that as a buyer, you had to go out and offer that exact price or agree with that price. But if you decided not to, there was a really good chance that you weren't going to get the property at that time. And that's why you saw homes selling, way above the asking price back then, is because things were moving quickly. In addition to that, there is a way that sellers can price properties in order to draw attention. So as a buyer, that's something that you need to be aware of. A seller can price the property at fair market value, which in my opinion is the best way to price a property, because I believe by pricing it at fair market value, you typically end up receiving the most amount of money. Now, in a crazy competitive environment, a crazy seller's market, underpricing that home might draw even more attention to it, and in turn receive competitive offers and drive that price up even higher. So when you're looking at property, you have to understand, is it priced where it should be? Or did they underprice it intentionally, or maybe even by mistake? Or is that property clearly overpriced based on other comparables out there in the market? And that seller is just outright crazy. They're shooting for the moon and there's no way they're going to get that price. You can still make an offer on a property like that. You just need to understand what it's worth, right? And not get caught up in the idea that the seller wants more for the home than it's actually worth. Now, in some cases, the seller is not willing to budge, but as a buyer, when you're making offers, depending on the market that you're in, that may determine how you approach writing that offer. Now, oftentimes, sellers want some room to negotiate. They don't want to come in with their best foot forward. They don't want to come in with their highest price first, because they always think, well, maybe if I had offered a little bit less, maybe I can get it for a little bit less. Because the worst thing that can happen is you write an offer and the seller just accepts that offer to start with. Because as a buyer, you're always going to second guess, well, could I have offered less and gotten that property or not? And so what I tell buyers all the time is you got to come in with your best foot forward, especially in a competitive environment. Now, in some cases, sellers want to leave room for negotiation. And I think you can, but it has to be in the right market. If it's a super competitive market, the home is priced correctly, it's in a hot neighborhood, it's been nicely remodeled, you went to the open house, there were a ton of people there, they already have offers on that property, well then there's a high likelihood that you're going to have to come in with your highest offer up front. Unfortunately, over the last year or so, we've seen a lot of sellers not even respond to the top offers. They're only responding to the top one or two, or maybe even just accepting an offer outright and negotiating it for a higher price. So oftentimes you might not get a rebuttal. You might not get a counter offer when you're not putting your best foot forward. So as a buyer, that's something you need to think about when originally writing that offer. Are you willing to miss out on this home? And if the answer is yes, then absolutely negotiate however you want. But what I like to tell buyers to do is draw a line in the sand. What is your line in the sand? What number are you willing to go up to that if your offer gets accepted, you're happy, but if it goes above that, you're okay. You have no regrets that they accepted an offer $1,000 more. Well, oftentimes the buyer will be like, well, if they accept $1,000 more, then I would offer $1,000 more. Well, then that's not your line in the sand. Figure out what price you're willing to go up to where there are no regrets on it getting accepted and there are no regrets on the seller moving forward with another offer. Now, another factor that's going to play into you writing an offer is figuring out the seller motivation. Now, this is something that should happen as you figure out what the comps are worth, as you start figuring out, kind of where you're going to make your offer. Is your agent should be calling the agent on the other side to figure out if they can find out why the seller is moving. Is there a reason? Is the property already vacant? Do you know anything about that seller? Have they already purchased a home? Are they in some sort of financial distress? Because if there is, that can impact how you write that offer, especially if there's nothing else on the table. Now, in a competitive environment, you still have to be aggressive in many of these cases. But if you've got a home that's been sitting on the market for an extended period of time, it's vacant, you've talked to the agent on the other side, and they say the seller's highly motivated, that sort of thing can mean that you can offer less on that property in order to get accepted. Now, what I'll say, in 20 years of selling real estate, I rarely ever seen a lowball offer accepted. Oftentimes, best case scenario, you see a home sell for a couple of percent under fair market value on that home. So if you know fair market value and that home is priced at fair market value, and it's been on the market for an extended period of time, then that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to sell for significantly less. Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, buyers are under this impression that if a home doesn't sell in a weekend or a week or 2 weeks, that there's something wrong with it or that it's severely overpriced. And in some cases that could be true, but on the flip side, maybe it's not true. Maybe that home was under contract and it fell out because the buyer couldn't get financing. Or maybe that home's been under contract with a couple of different buyers that have changed their mind and gotten cold feet over a period of time. And so days on the market are all relative and not a clear indication that a home is overpriced. So all of these things you're going to factor in when making your offer. But as I stressed earlier, you need to rely heavily on your real estate agent. They're the person that can guide you through this process. Now, I've heard of buyers not trusting their real estate agent. I don't believe that the home is worth that, therefore I'm not going to make that offer. If that's the case, then you need to find an agent that you do trust. You need to work with somebody that you can communicate with, that you can have these conversations with, that understands the market in that area. Now, that doesn't mean you have to offer what they're saying the home is worth. In fact, the agent should never be telling you this is what you need to offer. They should be guiding you and giving you information and ultimately letting you make the decision. But with that, make sure you're working with a professional. Now, if you're located here in Orange County, I would love the opportunity to help you find the right home. In fact, my contact information is listed below. But if you're watching this video and you're located in another area and you want to work with a real estate professional that works like I do, I created a referral link of people that I know, like, and trust that is listed below that can get you in touch with someone just like me. So if that interests you at all, do me a favor and hit that link. Now, one last thing I want to touch on is people often say, should I look at Zillow and Redfin as an idea of what a home is worth? Should I use the number that they're telling me? And the answer is no. Zillow, Redfin, these online sites should be used as a tool in the toolbox. It should be one of the things that you use in helping you make a decision in many cases. But what I will tell you as an agent that's been selling real estate for an extended period of time, these online sites, their numbers are easily influenced. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, for example, I recently sold my home. When I listed it on the market, I looked at Zillow prior to putting it on the market. It told me that my house was worth just over 1.2 million. Well, I knew that wasn't right. I knew that it was worth closer to 1.3 million. So if I had followed Zillow, I would have left nearly $100,000 on the table. Well, what do you know? I'm an agent. I understand prices, surprisingly, right? No, just kidding. I actually listed the home for what I wanted to, which was 1.3 million. Well, guess what happened? Immediately, Zillow changes their number to 1,309,000, which is nearly $100,000 more than their initial number. Why? Just because I listed the property in the MLS, that affected their number. So you can't just use the number that shows up online. You have to also look at comparables and look at the different things that we talked about in today's video. But a lot of this confusion can be cleared up by making sure you're working with that professional like I mentioned earlier. But if you're in the home buying process and you're wondering how to approach the offer here in Orange County, what do you need to be thinking about outside of price? Well, do me a favor and check out this video here.